institutions is scarcely a fulfillment of St. Paul's great definition of charity so often read in our lodges, by exercising which we are wont to say that a Mason attains the summit of his profession. There is a far larger sense of brotherhood than the limited conventional one obtaining among those who are members of a common association. There is that deep sense in which a man feels himself not only in fraternity with his fellow men, whether Masonically his brethren or not, but realizes himself brother to all that is, part of the universal life that thrills through all things. A great illuminate, Saint Francis of Assisi, expressed what I refer to when he wrote in his famous canticle, of his brothers the sun and the wind, his sisters the moon and the sea, his brethren the animals and the birds, as being all parts of a common life, all constituents in the scheme of the great architect for the restoration of the temple of creation and its dedication to his service, and as all worthy of a common love upon our part, even as they are the subject of a common solicitude upon his. And passing from these primary qualifications we proceed to what is signified by our second degree, wherein is inculcated the analysis and cultivation of the mental and rational faculties, the study of the secrets of the marvelous, complex, psychical nature of man, the relation of these with the still higher and spiritual part of him which, in turn, he may learn to trace even to the throne of God himself with which he is affiliated at the root essence of his being. These studies, brethren, so lightly touched upon in our passing ceremony, so glibly referred to as we recite our ritual, when undertaken with the seriousness that attached to them in the old mystery systems are not without just reason described in our own words as serious, solemn and awful. The depths of human nature and self-knowledge, the hidden mysteries of the soul of man are not, as real initiates well know, probed into with impunity except by the properly prepared. The man who does so has, as it were, a cable tow around his neck, because when once stirred by a genuine desire for the higher knowledge that real initiation is intended to confer, he can never turn back on what he learns thereof without committing moral suicide. He can never be again the same man he was before he gained a glimpse of the hidden mysteries of life. And as the angel stood with the flaming sword at the entrance of Eden to guard the way to the tree of life, so will the man whose initiation is not a conventional one find himself threatened at the door of the higher knowledge by opposing invisible forces if he rashly rushes forward in a state of moral unfitness into the deep secrets of the center. Better remain ignorant than embark upon this unknown sea unwisely and without being properly prepared and in possession of the proper passports. And eventually the aspirant, after these preliminary disciplines, has to learn the great truth embodied in the third degree, that he who would be raised to perfection and regain what he has long realized has been lost to himself, may do so only by utter self-abnegation, by a dying to all that to the eyes and the reason of the uninitiated outer world is precious and desirable. The third degree, brethren, is an exposition in dramatic ceremonial of the text whoso would save his life must lose it. Beneath the allegory of the death of the Master, and remember that it is allegory, is expressed the universal truth that mystical death must proceed mystical rebirth. Know ye not that ye must be born again? Unless a grain of corn fall into the ground and die, it abideth alone, if it die it bringeth forth much fruit. And it is only thus that all master masons can be raised from a figurative as not a physical, death to a regenerated state and to the full stature of human nature. The path of true initiation into fullness of life by way of a figurative death to one's lower self is the path called in the scriptures the narrow way, of which it is also said that few there be who find it. It is the narrow path between the pillars, for Boaz and Jew can stand impliedly at the entrance of every Masonic temple, and between them we pass each time we enter the lodge. Very great prominence is accorded these pillars in the ritual, but very little explanation of their import is given, and it is desirable to know something of their great significance. To deal with them at all fully would require an entire lecture upon this one subject, and even then there would have to remain unsaid in regard to these great symbols much that is unsuited to treatment in a general lecture. The pillars form, and have always formed, a prominent feature in the temples of all great systems of religion and initiation, whether Masonic or not. They have been incorporated into Christian architecture. If you recall the construction of York Minster or Westminster Abbey, you will recognize the pillars in the two great towers flanking the main entrance to those cathedrals at the west end of the structure. Non-Masons, therefore, enter these temples, as we do, between the pillars in the west. They look through them along the straight path that leads to the high altar, just as the Mason's symbolic passage is also from the west to the throne in the east. That path is, as it were, the straight path of life, beginning in this outer world and terminating at the throne, or altar, in the east. Many centuries before our Bible was written or the Temple of Solomon described in the books of Kings and Chronicles was thought of, the two pillars were used in the great temples of the mysteries in Egypt, and one of the great annual public festivals was that of the setting up of the pillars. What, then, did they signify? I can deal with the subject but very superficially here. In one of their aspects they stand for what is known in Eastern philosophy as the pairs of opposites. Everything in nature is dual and can only be known in contrast with its opposite, whilst the two in combination produce a metaphysical third which is their synthesis and perfect balance. Thus we have good and evil, light and darkness, and one of the pillars was always white and the other black, active and passive, positive and negative, yes and no, outside and inside, man and woman. Neither of these is complete without the other. Taken together they form stability. Morning and evening unite to form the complete day. Man is proverbially imperfect without his better half, woman, the two marry to impart strength to each other and to establish their common house. Physical science shows all matter to be composed of positive and negative electric forces in perfect balance and that things would disintegrate and disappear if they do not stand firm in perfect union. Every drop of healthy blood in our bodies is a combination of red and white corpuscles, by the due balance of which we are established in strength and health, whilst lack of balance is attended by disease. The pillars therefore typify, in one of their aspects, perfect integrity of body and soul such as are essential to achieving spiritual perfection. In the terms of ancient philosophy all created things are composed of fire and water, fire being their spiritual and water their material element, and so the pillars represented also these universal properties. In one of the apocryphal scriptures, 2 Esdras, 7:7-8, the path to true wisdom and life is spoken of as an entrance between a fire on the right hand and a deep water on the left, and so narrow and painful that only one man may go through it at once. This is an allusion to the narrow and painful path of real initiation of which our entrance into the lodge between the pillars is a symbol. Now all great symbols are shadowed forth in the person of man himself. The human organism is the true lodge that must be opened and wherein the great mysteries are to be found, and our lodge rooms are so built and furnished as to typify the human organism. The lower and physical part of us is animal and earthy, and rests, like the base of Jacob's ladder, upon the earth, whilst our higher portion is spiritual and reaches to the heavens. These two portions of ourselves are in perpetual conflict, the spiritual and the carnal ever warring against one another, and he alone is the wise man who has learned to effect a perfect balance between them and to establish himself in strength so that his own inward house stands firm against all weakness and temptation. And in still another sense the two pillars may be seen exemplified in the human body. There are our two legs, upon both of which we must stand firm to acquire a perfect physical balance. And why, having discerned this simple truth, and having seen that the path of true initiation, which is one of spiritual rebirth, is an arduous and painful progress to him who undertakes it, let me ask you to consider in all sacredness another physical phenomenon, the great mystery of which we perhaps think little of by reason of its frequency and of our familiarity with it. I refer to the incident of great mystery, I might say of childbirth. Brethren, every child born into this world, coming into this life as into a great house of initiation, trial and discipline, passes, amid pain and travail, through a straight and narrow way in between the two pillars that support the temple of its mother's body. And thus in the commonplaces of life, in which for those who have clean hearts there is nothing common or unclean but everything is sacred and symbolic, the act of physical birth is an image and a foreshadowing of that mystical rebirth and of that passing through a straight gate and a narrow double way in a deeper sense, without which it is written that a man shall not enter into the kingdom of heaven. The regenerated man, the man who not merely in ceremonial form but in vital experience, has passed through the phases of which the Masonic degrees are the faint symbol, is alone worthy of the title of Master Mason in the building of the temple that is not made with hands but that is being built invisibly out of the souls of just man made perfect. Not only in this world is this temple being built, only the foundations of the intended structure are perceptible here. The craft contemplates other and loftier planes of life, other stories of the vast structure than this we live and work in. Just as our craft organization has its higher assemblies and councils in the form of the provincial and the grand lodges that regulate and minister to the need of the lodges of common craftsmen, so in the mighty system of the universal structure there are grades of higher life, hierarchies of celestial beings working and ministering in the loftier portions of the building, beyond our present ken. And as here at the head of our limited untemporal brotherhood there rules the Grand Master, so too over the cosmic system there presides the great architect and most worshipful Grand Master of all, whose officers are holy angels, and the recognition of this truth may tend to consecrate us in the discharge of the little symbolic part we severally perform in the system which is the image of the great scheme. The world at large, brethren, is as it were, but one great lodge in place of initiation, of which our Masonic lodges are the little mirrors. Mother Earth is also the mother lodge of us all. As its vast work goes on, souls are ever descending into it and souls are being called out of it at the knocks of some great unseen warden of life and death, who calls them here to labor and summons them hence for refreshment. After the lodge, the festive board, after the labor of this world, the repast and refreshment of the heavenly places. And thus, although our after proceedings have no formal place in the Masonic system, any more than the afterlife is in formal connection with us whilst our sphere of activity is in this present world, still it plays a striking and of appropriate part calculated to awaken us to the deep significance of our customary conviviality. Upon such occasions we are wont to drink the toast of the King in the craft, remembering as loyal subjects and loving brethren our earthly sovereign and our Masonic comrades throughout the world. But here again I would ask every master who gives and every brother who drinks this toast, to lift his thoughts to a greater king and to a larger craft than our limited and symbolic fraternity. I would remind you how in the Christian mysteries there was another master whom unconsciously we imitate, who also after supper took the cup and when he had given thanks to the King of Kings, pledged himself, as it were, to that larger craft which is coextensive with humanity itself, directing them in this manner to show forth symbolically a certain great mystery until his coming again. But this, brethren, is none other than what is implied in our own Masonic words when we also are directed to use certain substituted secrets until time and circumstances shall restore to us the genuine ones. In submitting, then, these thoughts to you, it may be claimed that Masonry offers to those capable of appreciating it a working philosophy and a practical rule of life. It discloses to us the scheme of the universe, a scheme once shattered and arrested, but left in the hands of humanity to restore. It indicates our place, our purpose and our destiny in that universe. It is as a great house of instruction and initiation into the mysteries of a larger and fuller life than the unenlightened worldling is as yet ripe Masonry for appreciating. Let us, therefore, value and endeavor fully to appreciate its mysteries. Let us also be careful not to cheapen the order by failing to realize its meaning and by admitting to its ranks those who are unready or unfitted to understand its import. I said at the outset of this lecture that some Masons are beginning to awake to a larger consciousness of the true meaning and purport of our craft. I say now at the end, brethren, lift up your hearts, throw wide open the shutters of your minds and imaginations. Learn to see in Masonry something more than a parochial system enjoining elementary morality, performing perfunctory and meaningless rites, and serving as an agreeable accessory to social life. But look to find in it a living philosophy, a vital guide upon those matters which of all others are the most sacred and the most urgent to our ultimate well-being. Realize